The HOA installed surveillance cameras in Michael Harris's backyard without his permission, claiming it was for his safety. When he objected, the HOA president, Beverly Higgins, arrogantly told him he'd have to deal with it. But Michael wasn't backing down. He gathered evidence, took the matter to court, and soon uncovered shocking truths. The cameras were installed illegally, and funds were withdrawn from residents' accounts without their knowledge. When the judge ruled in Michael's favor, the HOA faced serious consequences. Michael proved that even one person can stand up for their rights. But let's start from the beginning. Michael Harris, a calm family man and owner of a cozy home in the suburbs, had always considered his backyard a place of solitude and relaxation. It was where he spent time with his family, took care of the garden, and enjoyed the peace after long working days. The morning began as usual. Michael stepped out onto the porch with a cup of coffee, savoring the silence and the scent of freshly mown grass. But suddenly, his gaze was drawn to something unusual. On the tall wooden fence that separated his property from his neighbor's lot, something odd was attached. As he approached, Michael saw that it was a surveillance camera. The lens of the device was aimed directly at his yard, invading his family's privacy. A sense of unease and indignation grew in his chest. How could this be possible? Michael immediately grabbed his phone and dialed the number of the HOA president, Mrs. Beverly Higgins, a powerful and self-assured woman known for her strict control over the neighborhood. After a few rings, her cold voice came through the line. "This is part of the security program. We are not required to ask for permission," she said curtly. Michael felt his face flush. He held back his emotions, but inside, a storm was raging. How could they so easily invade his private life without asking a single word? It was not only disrespectful, but also illegal. He knew this would not go unanswered. Hanging up, Michael felt the tension building. He wasn't used to situations like this, but he knew he had to act decisively. He would need to research the laws, consult a lawyer, and gather support from his neighbors. This fight for his privacy was just beginning. The wind rustled the leaves of the trees, creating a barely audible whisper. Michael stood there, staring at the camera as if expecting it to blink or move, but the device remained motionless. He took a sip of his now cold coffee, mentally forming a plan. He knew one thing. He wasn't going to let the HOA dictate what he could do in his own home. Confusion quickly turned into resolve. Michael felt that he could no longer stand by. The first thing he did was visit his closest neighbor, Mr. Williams, an elderly man who had always kept to himself but was a person of strong principles. "Did you see the cameras?" Michael pointed to the fence. "Yes," Williams nodded, frowning. "It's outrageous. My wife's afraid to go out into the yard." With each conversation, Michael became more convinced that this wasn't just his problem. Neighbors complained about the intrusive surveillance, about the threats of fines for disagreeing with the new rules. Many were afraid to speak out against the HOA, fearing retaliation. Beverly Higgins wasn't about to back down. She sent out letters stating that the cameras had been installed strictly for security purposes, and any attempts to remove them would result in fines and legal proceedings. Such pressure only fueled Michael's determination. He consulted a local lawyer, who confirmed that installing cameras without the owner's consent was a serious violation of privacy. Armed with this knowledge, Michael began documenting everything, photographing the cameras, gathering testimonies from neighbors, recording calls to the HOA. Meanwhile, Beverly tried to undermine Michael's credibility among the residents, spreading rumors about his supposed aggressive behavior. Some neighbors began to distance themselves from him, but true friends stood by his side. One evening, Michael received an anonymous letter in his mailbox. It contained details of the HOA's financial misconduct, proving that the cameras had been installed at the residents' expense without their consent. The letter also listed hidden expenses disguised as improvements that no one had ordered. This was his chance. He knew it was time to act decisively. He began organizing meetings with neighbors, explaining that they could file a collective complaint. Gradually, people started to come out of the shadows, realizing that together they could fight for their rights. Michael had gathered enough evidence to take the HOA to court. He filed a lawsuit accusing them of illegal invasion of privacy and the misappropriation of residents' funds. Soon, he received a notice with the date of the hearing. Preparations were in full swing. The lawyer helped gather all the necessary documents, including witness testimonies from neighbors and photographs of the cameras. The air was thick with tension, but Michael knew there was no turning back. At the first hearing, the judge listened attentively to both Michael's arguments and the HOA's lawyer. Beverly, confident in her impunity, looked at Michael with contempt, but her confidence began to fade as the lawyer presented evidence of financial misconduct and fake permits for the installation of the cameras. The courtroom buzzed with whispers. The residents were stunned by the revelations. When neighbor Mr. Williams testified, his words struck the HOA like a hammer. He described in detail how the cameras had invaded their privacy, causing fear and discomfort. People no longer felt safe in their own homes. The judge began asking questions, and it became clear that the HOA's position was weakening. Michael noticed how Beverly nervously gripped her pen, realizing the situation was slipping out of her control. The following hearings revealed even more shocking details. It turned out that money for the camera installation had been taken from residents' accounts without their knowledge, and the contracts with contractors had been backdated. When Michael's lawyer presented these findings, a murmur of discontent swept through the courtroom. The HOA's lawyer tried to justify the cameras, claiming they were installed solely for security and control of common areas. However, the judge was unimpressed. Michael held back a wave of emotions when the judge asked the key question. Why weren't the residents notified of such significant changes? No answer came, and that marked the beginning of the end for Beverly. As the case progressed, it became clear that the cameras had been installed by Beverly's personal order, without consulting the board. This was the turning point. The judge declared that the HOA had grossly violated the residents' rights and would be held accountable for their actions. Michael felt that victory was near. He knew the truth was on his side and felt the support of his neighbors. The atmosphere in the courtroom was charged, and everyone was waiting for the final decision that could change the entire community's future. The decisive hearing was ahead, and Michael understood. The stakes were now high. He looked at his neighbors, seeing hope and determination in their eyes. They had entrusted him with their fight, and he wasn't about to let them down. With each passing day, Michael's confidence grew. This time, he was ready to go all the way and seek justice, no matter the cost. The day of the final court hearing arrived. The courtroom was packed. Residents, journalists, and even representatives from other neighborhoods gathered to witness the outcome of this battle. Michael stood in the front row, his heart pounding faster, but inside he felt a calm confidence. Everything he had done over the past months had led him to this moment. The judge entered the courtroom, quickly reviewing the documents, and announced, "The court has ruled that the actions of the HOA are illegal. The cameras must be dismantled, and Michael Harris and the other residents are to receive compensation for emotional distress and legal costs." Applause broke out in the room. Michael closed his eyes for a moment, realizing that justice had prevailed. Beverly sat in her chair, her face pale. She tried to object, but the judge sharply cut her off, stating that any further objections would be handled in a separate proceeding. The residents exchanged joyful glances, many thanking Michael for his persistence and courage. After the trial, the residents held a meeting where they unanimously voted to completely overhaul the HOA board. The new leadership promised to work in the interests of the residents and restore trust in the organization. On his way home, Michael felt an incredible sense of relief. He had won. Not only in court, but in the fight for his privacy, for his right to be the master of his own land. "This is our victory," he thought, looking at his neighbors who smiled at him with genuine gratitude. And although the battle had been long and exhausting, Michael knew he had done the right thing. He had not only defended his rights, but had also inspired others to fight against injustice. Now he was certain that such stories should serve as an example for anyone facing violations of their rights.